Okay, we have a great group together for our performance R&D panel as well, and Tim Frost has put together such an amazing group all through the day that he's made my job really easy. And these next three gentlemen are really going to make this next segment very easy for me to run as well. The backgrounds are tremendous, so we're going to start by introducing a guy who, well, I don't think NASCAR will be quite as big without you, Herb. So I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Dennis, and good morning, everyone. I grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina back in the 50s and attended the short track races at Bowman Gray Stadium, watching the NASCAR Sportsman Series. And because of my passion for cars and racing, I decided that racing could be important for an automobile manufacturer. I listened to the local radio station and read the local papers and learned about events like the Indy 500, the Daytona 500, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and the Italian Mille Miglia. And I figured that these were probably pretty important races for an automobile manufacturer. During my senior year at North Carolina State University, I sent a resume to Junior Johnson, Richard Petty, and Ned Jarrett. I never heard from Junior or Richard. I did get a response from Bon DeLong, the crew chief and owner of Ned Jarrett's car. He said that he appreciated my interest, but they didn't have any need for an engineer. Well, fortunately, General Motors did have an interest. I hired in 1963 and retired 40 years later. And during this time, I continued to build on the idea that racing could be important for the automobile manufacturer. So continuing along the way, working with the best names in racing over a period of time, we won most of the races, established most of the goals I had set as a youngster growing up. And as this continued, I began to believe that maybe racing could be the ultimate proving ground for the automobile manufacturer. So, as time went along during my career, I designed high-performance engines and components. I was an engineer, manager, executive in motorsports programs. And in 2001, General Motors won the Indy 500, the Daytona 500, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the Rolex 24, and my wife Sandy and I competed in the Italian Mille Miglia, driving a 1953 Ferrari 250mm. Well, this car sold in August at Pebble Beach for $7 million. Well, obviously, during the event, I didn't share with Sandy the value of the vehicle. Great people, exciting places, fun, adventure. A career in racing has truly been a great ride. Thank you.
One of my favorite interviews that I ever did was with Ken Lingenfelter. Talk about a guy who has really changed that industry. Mike, you've got a great job.
Yeah, I get that a lot. So I always tell people all that glitters is not gold. So I'm sure that's the same for every track owner that's out here. So, but my name is Mike Copeland. I'm the vice president of Lingenfelter Performance Engineering. For those of you that may not know, we're a high-end performance part manufacturer. Our main focus is General Motors vehicles. I've known Herb a long time, even back to my GM days. And but we focus on high-performance components, high-performance cars. We manufacture vehicles, and lately we've added trucks to the line, off-road trucks, to what we build and sell. But our main focus is exactly that, the cars and the performance parts that people want. And we have a long-standing reputation. This will be our 42nd year in 2015. And we deliver dependable, drivable, enjoyable products that are reliable. So if you come to us and you want a 1,000 horsepower Corvette, we're going to build one for you that you can drive across the country and enjoy, and your wife can ride with you while you do it and not complain all the time. So that's our focus. And from a company creed, it is that we always underpromise and overdeliver. So if you buy a car from us and we sell you a 600 horsepower package, you can count on the fact that it's going to make more than that.
I've had a lot of people say that I should be the new spokesperson for the Hair Club for Men, and their saying is I'm not just a spokesperson, or I don't own the just own the company, I use it. Well, Michael, you had about the same thing. You went to a Skip Barber racing school years ago and ended up being the boss. That's a pretty cool deal.
Yeah, I'm honored to be on the panel with you two guys, by the way. Apparently, the first word that came out of my mouth was car, and I've been a gearhead ever since. And my first race experience was, I'm from Montreal, was at Le Circuit at Mont-Tremblant, and it was the first Can-Am race ever. And it was a fantastic series. But I did other things, and then fortunately, I was in a position where I could take a 3-day racing school. Finally, I wanted to do one years ago, but I did one in 1990, and it was at Skip Barber. And I fulfilled my dreams. I raced at Skip Barber, and then went on to do some other racing, and ended up being the majority owner of Skip Barber Racing School. The school is almost 40 years old. It'll be celebrating its 40th anniversary early next year. We plan to do quite a few things around that. But basically what we are is, given our model, our ride and drive model, is we really are the grassroots to motorsport, or the gateway to motorsports. And we've graduated over 300,000 students. And I would say, if it wasn't for the Skip Barber model, the arrive and drive model, the sort of variable cost approach to racing, a lot of those people wouldn't have been introduced to racing. So I think it's really important to build a community of people who love racing at the grassroots level if we're going to be successful at professional racing. But we are sort of the software that makes the hardware work at Skip Barber. We really focus a lot on driver development. We make dreams come true, life-changing experiences. That's on the retail side. On the B2B side, we bring the driver's driver, if you like, to the OEs. Our customers are the go-to people in their community. They're influencers. They are asked about cars, 64% of them at least once a week. And they provide third-party endorsements for products that they drive in our schools. So I'm really pleased to be here and look forward to talking to this group.
And Michael's ears were probably burning a few weeks ago. I was on a radio station up in Milwaukee, and the subject turned to driver development. And I said, we need in stock cars the same thing that Skip Barber does for the road course racing industry. Because I know racers of yours like Kenton Cook, who have spent the last 4, now 5 years racing on scholarships that he won at Skip Barber. So you guys are doing fabulous on that. Herb, I'm going to lead off with you with our first question of the day. Is racing still the best proving ground for the manufacturers?
Well, we need to clarify that and narrow the scope on the question. I want to speak about it domestically and from an automobile manufacturer standpoint. I think racing can be the ultimate proving ground for the automobile manufacturer. Certainly through the years, the safety era, aerodynamics, lubricants, rotating components, there have been so many areas in technology that have directly impacted the production of the vehicle. But as we look at the scenario today, racing is fundamentally a market-driven sport. It's no longer a technically driven sport. I mean, you take a close look at the technical specifications and the sporting regulations. How are they written and how are they designed? They're designed to improve the show, not to improve the technology transfer from the race car to the production vehicle, or to actually complement future products that are being built by the manufacturer. So I think the idea that it is the ultimate proving ground, I still believe in it. I built my career on that concept. Unfortunately today, it's not the case because of the focus on the show. I can cite products that have certainly benefited from it today. I think the C6, C7 Corvettes, if you think about those Corvettes versus historically what a Corvette represented, I think everyone would agree that today the Corvette is a world-class vehicle. But, think about, we went to Le Mans in 1989, we raced there in 2000, and we won in 2001. And think about what happened to the Corvette in the next decade relative to becoming a world-class car. So Dennis, yes, it can be the ultimate proving ground, but today, with rare exception, I don't think it is domestically from an automobile manufacturer's standpoint. Now, I'm sure that an aftermarket manufacturer and a racetrack representative will have a much different opinion about that.
Now, Mike, if you want to chime in, here's the great thing about RTBC, okay? We get three unique, different people together up here with different backgrounds, but we really value their input on something that might not be right in their wheelhouse. So guys, if you want to make a comment, please jump right in.
All right, I think I'd like to do that. So I think it's important and realize in my job, I may have the best job in the world to a lot of people, but just like in many of your cases, the reality is the buck stops here. So I'm the guy that has to decide whether we spend the money to do a new product, how we spend that money, how much money we spend, and the ultimate goal of it is what's the return. So way back in the 60s and in the 70s, you would build a part for a car, put it on a car, and you had to validate it and test it. You had to know if it was going to last. You had to know if it was going to deal with what you designed it to do, how that was going to function. Today, that's completely different. Every component that we design, and we release approximately 40 new products a year that we develop, design, engineer, develop, and then release and sell to the public. Every one of those products is designed in a computer. There's not a single thing that's done today by just taking apart and making it. It's all designed electronically. We can run it through every kind of test that you can imagine. We run failure mode analysis on every part. I can tell you if the shock bracket that you mounted a shock to is within specification based on the valving change we made in that shock. I can do all of that on the computer. Now, I can test it and truly do the final proving at a track. But the reality of it is I don't even need the track to do that. I can do all of that. It can be designed, engineered, tested, and validated all in the computer. So it changes what we do with the tracks and what we need to do with the tracks. So that's part of the change that Herb talks about when he says it used to be that we had to go to the racetracks and we took that technology, developed it there, and took it back. Today, we really use the racetrack just to prove what we already believe will work. So.
And Michael, with the race school, you've got a lot of spec car programs, and that's a great way for the manufacturers to make sure their parts and pieces are working.
Yeah, we're the ultimate sort of reliability field, the testing ground, if you like. We do about almost 3 million miles a year in our fleet of race cars. We have about 170 cars. Half are open wheel, half are MX-5 Cup cars. And it's true that you can do a lot on the computer and it's getting better and better, but it's always surprising when you've done all the analysis on the computer. I'm not an engineer, so take it for a grain of salt. But then you put the car on track and you're surprised about what happens. And I come from the aviation industry and aerospace where a lot of stuff has been done on computer for a long time. And I'm sure Boeing thought the 787 was going to work a lot better than it did. But again, the 787 was designed probably 15 years ago. So things have changed since then, obviously. But we do put a lot of wear and tear on our cars. And it's amazing how these crate engines that are just designed for street use last as long as they do. And the MX-5 Cup car is basically a street car, and the kind of wear and tear it takes is just incredible that it lasts as well as it does.
And a lot of very inexperienced drivers, I would imagine, that are a little rougher on the brakes than a pro is as well.
Well, they're rougher on the transmission, that's for sure. You know, our open wheel car is sequential box, which is not bulletproof. I mean, you still have to treat it properly. But the MX-5 has a H pattern, and yeah, we do have transmission issues.
Yeah, whenever anyone says that this, you know, their product is idiot-proof, I say, you haven't had me out at the track yet. But that's a whole nother story. Mike, I was out at SEMA last month, and some of the cars out there, I mean, you look at these things and they're spectacular to look at, but I look at them from the standpoint of being really impractical a lot of times. But when I see a Lingenfelter production, whether it's a car that's going to be a street car or even an off-road truck or anything that you guys ever turn out, what I'm always amazed is not only does it look cool, not only does it have the great performance, but it's also got the safety, you know, every part, every piece, every part is challenged to have everything to make up a great product. How tough is that when you have to balance looks versus performance versus safety versus something that will, quite frankly, sell?
Yeah, that's very difficult, and don't forget the cost. So that you have to add that into every one of those equations. So we take a different approach to that than a lot of companies. You know, there are a lot of aftermarket companies, and there are a lot of really good ones, and there are some that maybe aren't quite as good as they could be. You know, from our perspective, we have engineers on staff, and that's critical, I believe, to what we do. We have designers and computer operators on staff. We have machinists on staff. We have fabricators. We have technicians. I mean, we have a large contingent of people. We spend the money to buy the right equipment. I mean, between our two build facilities, we have 4 engine dynos and 4 chassis dynos, and our engine dynos almost never shut off. I mean, you take a program like the C7 Corvette with a direct injected engine. We've purchased to this point 9 vehicles to do development for that program. We started with pickup trucks because we knew they were the first one that would have that direct injected engine in it. So we had a pickup truck. We got one of the first 2014s. We were able to get one of the first engines, which, by the way, GM let out and then tried to pull back. But we wouldn't give ours back. But we had that running on a dyno within a day of receiving it. And just to give you an idea how important those engineers are to make that thing run, there's an immobilizer system in the trucks and in all the new cars that make the truck communicate with the engine controller to let the engine run. Well, because we had an engine controller, but we didn't have the computer that generated the immobilizer signal, we parked our truck outside the dyno cell, tapped into the wiring on it, and ran it through the dyno cell, through the vent. And we had to use the truck to start the engine on the dyno.
Wow.
That's what engineers do. Yeah, but that's the reality of it. And if you're going to build a car, you know, you can make a decision on any part you build or anything you do. You can take the low end, you can take the middle, or you can go to the high end. In our case, for 42 years, we've taken the high end of that, and we target that customer and we build that car that delivers on all of those things.
Recently, Michael, on our At the Apex road course racing show, we had a whole show about Skip Barber because it's the Kleenex. So, you know, you guys are like the Kleenex of road racing schools. You are the brand. And I thought I knew a lot about Skip Barber until I started researching more for that interview. Your Carts to Cars championship that you run, I'm amazed because everybody that's won that over the years, guys like Ryan Hunter-Ray, Ricky Taylor, Joel Miller, they didn't have much experience in the car. They proved themselves on the track and leapfrogged to bigger, better things in professional road racing. What makes a great car? To test a driver to make sure you end up with those kinds of results. Because if you got lucky one time with the Carts to Cars champion, that'd be one thing. But it's like a who's who list.
Well, our car is, you know, the Carters come out of really a stiff chassis, and they get in our car, which has, you know, it's fairly tried and true technology. It's not the newest technology, our open wheel car, and but it has quite a bit of roll in it compared to like a F2000. And to drive it at 10 tenths and get that last 3/10 or 2/10 of a second out of it. You have to be really, really good. And it teaches car control. There's not a lot of aero, very little. I mean, we have wings on it, but it's more for, they work at about 130 miles an hour. But it's a car that's forgiving to a point, but it gives you a lot of feedback. And some of the kids come out of karting, they can't get used to it. They can't get used to the roll and the feedback. But the ones that are adaptable, which is, to me, a good race driver can adapt quickly. They go on and do very well.
Any questions for our panel?
Before we get a question, Dennis,
Yes.
I'd like to say a couple of things about what these gentlemen talked about. First of all, Mike, for building a consumer product of the level of performance you do, the whole idea of performance today, it's a totally different concept, and it transitioned back years ago when fuel economy, emissions, and other things became important. So I think that today it's amazing that an automobile manufacturer can actually design, build, certify, and sell the level of performance cars that they do. I mean, it used to be horsepower, acceleration. Those were the performance things that you looked at. Today, it's a whole package. And the fact that we can go buy a Corvette, Mustang, Camaro, Ferrari, I mean, Porsche's always done that. To me, is pretty amazing for the enthusiast who isn't necessarily the racer, but he wants to drive a high-performance vehicle. So I really compliment you, Mike, on what you've been able to do there. For what you do at your speedway there, let's face reality. Professional racing in this country today is spec racing. And as Lynn St. James and other drivers can tell you that drove in a different era, it's a lot different story than driving the type of products they drove. So it's very important that these ladder series where all the drivers have the same tires, same setup, same shocks, same parameters. They have the ability to learn to manage that product at the entry level. Because if you think about the finish of a Sprint Cup car race today, the cars that are there are the drivers that managed the vehicle, that kept it clean, kept the alignment correctly, had the minimum amount of pit stops, things like that. And in those last 5 laps, which is what it's all about, typically they're the guys that win their race. So the whole idea of spec racing, well, we could spend the next 2 days talking about it. I'm not a big fan of it at the highest levels, but I have to admit that it does have a purpose for our future drivers.
I'm going to throw a toss-up question again, if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll bring the mic around. But while I'm doing that, I'm going to throw out kind of a 100-point, toss-up question to the class here. Is there still as much transfer of technology today? You talk about the spec car era of today. Is there as much transfer of technology from racing to the streets or from high performance to the streets as there was years ago? I'll let you guys arm wrestle over who gets that one.
I think in the case of Mike, there's a lot of transfer. For every high-performance aftermarket manufacturer in the audience, and certainly even if you're dealing with the spec series, there's a tremendous amount of things you learn from the product. But today, when you look at the technical specs, you have to really scratch your head to find something that means something to the automobile manufacturer. And I personally don't like that. I spent my career, not always winning popularity contests, but I was continuously pushing the idea that racing was the ultimate proving ground for the manufacturer. It creates awareness. I mean, think of the energy and climate era we're in today. During my career, the greatest opportunities I ever saw for rationalizing why I was doing a program, and I spent the bulk of my time rationalizing why GM should be spending money. Safety was the big ticket. Safety enabled us to increase budgets, increase programs, really move down the road. The second big opportunity, and unfortunately I was out of the company at that time, was the energy and climate situation. So until such time as the automobile manufacturers collectively work together to change the system we have today, the technology at that level is going to be limited, the technology transfer.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, especially I spent 26 years at GM, so yeah, today the technology going back to the OEs is not there. I think in our case, there's definitely technology. They're still learning. I mean, even though we design things and we engineer them, you know, in the computer and do all of that, we race a car in a series, in the Optima series. It's a traveling kind of road show. They're all street-based cars, and we've traveled around the country and ran. This year we ran 10 tracks across the country with an 11th track in Las Vegas is kind of the final. And we run a Camaro in that series, and we do that intentionally because it's a vehicle that we sell a lot of product for. We use it to test and develop, and we're all required. Our main only real standard that every car has to compete under is a 200 tread wear tire. And aside from that, the rules are wide open. I mean, we've had competitors show up with a 90 horsepower Ford Pinto, and we've had competitors show up with you know 1,500 horsepower Lamborghinis, and they all compete on the same tracks. So it's autocross, speed stop, and then road course. So as we do that, our cars have consistently got faster. They've gotten better. I have a driver that I think he believes it's his job to try and break parts. So it's like that's what I'm paying him for. But you know, we've learned a lot, and the cars have gotten better. Our cars have gotten faster. Our components have gotten better. We found weak links. You know, we found things, and I think that's the same with every driver. You know, you talk about parts that everybody manufactures to put in a car and how they still fail. You know, no matter what you do when you design it for a specific parameter, a specific use, a specific load, a specific purpose. And people are really good at taking them past that. So we set an engine red line at 7,500 RPM. And I got a text. I was in a plane and I landed and my phone buzzed. And it was one of the people that runs our engine. And he says, I know the rev limiter's at 7,700, but I really don't want to shift before I go to the next turn. And I raised it to 8,200. Is that okay? That's just what they do.
We don't develop any really any technology for the auto people. You guys do it, and then we expose in an intimate environment 6 hours a day that product to customers, and they go away with that experience. We do spend quite a bit of time on. Is this working? Yeah. We do spend quite a bit of time on developing curricula and methods for teaching drivers, and that's why we got involved with the FIA and the regional training provider. And it's not just how to drive the car anymore. You got to go beyond that. You've got to be physically fit, and you've got to be psychologically fit. And so that's a lot of the stuff that we're working on, is to develop better drivers faster, accelerate their development, so they spend less money developing themselves, and go on and do a great job.
Just a real quick thing. We have a big discussion going on now because we're working on 2015 rules for the Optima series. And one of the key points that somebody made talking about cars, and there's a lot of discussion about why you should or shouldn't have wings and what you should or shouldn't have at ABS and all the other things. And somebody finally posted, you know, a driver in a specific car would go a lot faster spending $3,000 to go to a driver's school than they would spending $3,000 on a new set of wheels.
That's a great plug. I appreciate that. It's so true. We had a driver come to us, an SCCA driver. He's a Miata driver, and at Lime Rock, and he took 2 seconds off his time. And it's a short track. It's only 1.5 miles. And he said there's no amount of money he could spend on his car to get 2 seconds off his time.
Well, thank you. This will fit right in, Mike. I'm curious, when you look at the traditional school model, Skip Barber, what has been the impact of all of these streetcar events that have shown up, and how do you see the traditional school model moving forward when men and women are getting on tracks with their personal cars in various forms?
Well, I have sort of 2 points of view on that. On one, it's great that people are buying, 10 years ago, 300 horsepower was a lot of horsepower. Now you can buy a Speed 3 with almost 300 horsepower for $21,000. So people want to experience what those cars can do, and the only place you can do it is on track, which is good for us. It also is good for us that it exposes more people to the experience of pushing the limits to an extent. Where we're going, we're actually going to start doing some track day events ourselves, probably, or I know, in coordination with some of our school events, because track rent's a huge expense for us. So the more seats we can sell in a day of track rent, the better for us. But that's definitely something we're going to do, use where people can bring their whatever car they want. Of course, they have to be technically fit and so on. And so we're going to start doing that.
I have a question about the larger racing ecosystem and how it's transferring to, the broad scope of motorsports. If you listen to the ISC and the Speedway's conference calls, they're still hemorrhaging attendance, TV, and specifically when you look at IndyCar and NASCAR, how is the technology packages, is it impacting what's happening with the larger series, and what's that doing to the smaller series? Is that impacting the show and why people are turning away? I don't know. I'd like to have you all talk about it.
It doesn't help. I think the split between CART and IRL really hurt open wheel racing in this country. It's good to see it's getting back together. I think the United Sports Car Series and the combination of Grand Am and ALMS is really going to be helpful. Sports car racing, I think, is on the up and up here. I think the thing that we ask ourselves a lot about is how are the electronic world, the gaming world and so on, how's that affecting our business? And how do we get closer to that business? We have an affiliation with iRacing, for instance. Skip Barber Racing Car is the car that's raced the most at iRacing. I think those things are helpful, but it's younger people they've got more money than we had when we were younger, most of them, and eventually they're going to buy cars. They're going to actually have to get a car and drive from A to B. And right now, though, they use the cell phone and so on as their sort of mobility. The way we used to get in our parents' station wagon and drive over and see our friends. Now they're on, they're texting each other and so on. So we have to tap into that thinking to help grow the business. I don't know if that answers your question. It's just some thinking I have.
I think it's unfortunate in this country that the model of one sanctioning organization has impacted the other major organizations the way it has. And so we have a stereotype racing concept in NASCAR, IndyCar, and sports car racing. And in the interim, while we have a good market now, we have a good economy. So while the system may be surviving, we all know they've got this midlife crisis in these 500-mile races from the lap 5 to lap 400. People go do other things and they come back and catch the green-white checkered finish. And in my mind, that has presented incredible opportunity for these thousands of racetracks that Tim talked about. The experiment at Eldora with dirt. I was amazed when Tim said half the tracks are dirt in his manual, and that's incredible. And so as this stereotype model is kind of, quelched the sport in this country, I think there's opportunity for breakout. And it's going to come from the typical innovative mindset in racing. Racing today is engineering in a box. It's engineering optimization. It's not innovation. Innovation, and I look at cheating as innovation. And
I call that interpretation.
and what would happen if all of a sudden you rewarded people for their technical, creativity? And out of that, some real technical transfer, some real innovation, some real impact of a race car on a production vehicle could happen. And the mindset today saddens me about how all the major series have succumbed to this same model, this same boring model, with too many parade laps, too many caution laps, and too many things that aren't transparent. So anyway.
Yeah, my take's a little different. So, I remember one of my first days in business school when I sat down and one of my instructors told me, he said, if you're going to own a business, run a business, you're going to have to reinvent that every 5 years, no matter what it is. And the invention that you have to create may be something that you don't know anything about. And in my opinion, there's a new generation. There's all these, I'm 58 years old, so I grew up racing. The first NASCAR race that I ever saw, I went with my dad and my uncle, and a movie theater did a live feed of the Daytona 500, and that was in the early 60s. And I remember spending the day in a movie theater watching the Daytona 500. Okay, and I've tried to watch every one since. But that's the era that I was. Today, social media, the Twitters, the Facebooks, those parts of the world, that's where people spend time. That's where they get their information from. We used to get a newspaper delivered to the house every day, and I would sit down at night and open that up and read it. That's where I used to get my information. Today, I haven't had a newspaper in my house in 5 years because we just didn't read it. It was a pile of paper sitting there, okay? So I think that we as the leaders of this industry and our role today, we have a responsibility to teach those, to go to where they are and teach them what we do and get them involved with what we do. That's how we create more of that excitement. To Herb's point, yeah, I get, when I watch a NASCAR race today, I'm not going to buy a Toyota Camry ever, but I'm not going to buy one because they race it in NASCAR. I'm not going to buy, there's not that tie, and I used to go watch them, beat on a 57 Chevy at the local dirt track. And man, I wanted one. That was it. But today I have an employee whose job is dedicated to social media, to do all of those kinds of things. Every day we send out email blasts, we send out social media things. When he hits the button on that computer, we have over 100,000 followers on Facebook at Lingenfelter.
But Mike, I agree with what you're saying, but I also think that that's the problem, because all the focus and effort in the last decade has been on the things peripheral to the race. And in our business, in automotive business, there's a thing called a core product. And in my mind, the core product is the race itself. And the race itself is what's suffering today. So all the attention beyond the race, at some point in time, maybe the next time the economy takes a dip, I believe eventually these major organizations will get back and worry a little bit more about their core product. I mean, speaking on behalf of GM, I know what happened when they got their eye off the ball, off the core product. And the major organizations haven't had their eye on the core product, which is a race.
Just on building on that, I agree with that. Building on that, just an example of social media and young kids. I have an 8-year-old son who just started playing soccer about a year ago, and he has a mini iPad, which his grandmother, my mother-in-law, gave him. And he got on the FIFA has a site, a game you can play, very simple. You just push a few buttons, move the mini iPad around, and he now knows all the moves, all the players. He's playing soccer, well, not in the winter, but he plays 9 months of the year, about 5 days a week. It's just like totally passionate about it. And it doesn't have to be and so my point is it's not a complicated game. It's just a game that introduces them to the rules and the excitement and the passion. And I think the FIA is trying to do this with somebody, but it's just an example of another sport that, years ago, soccer was, I went to school and I played soccer, and I was considered a wimp because I wasn't playing football in Canada. And but now soccer is taking over from football. It's just grown like crazy. So just an example of another sport that's accelerated the growth through some social media mechanisms.
Ron Hagan, Track Lab Dyno. I am pleased that Dennis has doing this because I'm on Dennis's Race Talk Radio show from time to time, which draws us a lot of attention. But I'm very pleased with the Lingenfelders and the Roush's of the world saying, "Oh yes, we use 7 dynos to develop everything that we touch." Believe it or not, there are still people out there that at the racetrack say, "Oh, I don't need that dyno. I use the butt dyno and my time slips and I see what my spark plugs are burning." Well, they tend to get beat. But I've been in the dyno business a dozen years, and we've seen an awful lot of change of thought. You cannot, with today's cars, you simply cannot tune or retune or do anything without a dyno. It is simple as that. And as far as social media, by the way, I got liked, or you guys got liked by somebody in Saudi Arabia already because I've just streamed you this morning.
And Ron and I are working on a performance program on Race Talk Radio that we'll need to talk during the off season here when we finally get a break for both of our businesses. A young lady in the back, I think, had a question.
Thank you, Dennis. I just wanted to, on a positive note, on the technology piece, to address to whoever would like to answer this, that on the, the example that you used, Herb, about, we don't need engineers, what I do see, and I would like to see, your comments on it, of how many more engineers, though, we now need from a technology standpoint in motorsports, and which is opening career opportunities for many young people who are going to study engineering and who maybe don't want to work for General Motors or Ford Motor Company or, the traditional path that most engineers would take, that are now being able to be in motorsports. So I'd like to kind of get your comment about that.
And before you guys answer, we're going to save a little time here. Troy from American Racer, I need you up at the front here. Now you guys can answer.
You want to take that one, Herbert? About engineering?
Yeah, I've always believed that one of the greatest benefits from an automobile manufacturing racing is a positive impact on people. And it's hard to measure, it's hard to quantify. Today we have metrics for everything, but my own experience to see the positive impact on the engineers that spent time in racing is incredible. And I think in racing, you develop that thing called that gut instinct. And a gut instinct can help any CEO in any business. And gut instinct is that ability that when the stuff hits the fan, you make the right call. And we see that on that last pit stop in a race. And the guys that make the right call are good. Well, you really need those people in industry too. And I think the challenge is, do you want to make it a career, or do you want to make it a stepping stone to an executive position? And certainly today, the predominance of engineers in racing is incredible. But it bothers me that they're engineering in a box. They're not truly stretching their imagination, and they don't have the ability to really think and utilize all the great tools they have today. But certainly a positive impact on any career can emerge from being involved in a racing environment.
I'm just interested, Herb, on the technology transfer and how you feel about the engineers, what you just said. Do you feel the same way about Formula One?
Well, this morning I specifically said domestic racing. Formula One is a whole different world. And when you look at the investment Mercedes, Honda, Renault, and at times BMW and Toyota have made in Formula One, and you look at the specifications of the vehicles, particularly the energy recovery, I have to believe that there has been a significant amount of research and technology transfer back that impacted future products. When you look at the global perspective today, the manufacturers that have always had that sorted out, the key one is Porsche. Porsche has always figured out that, they build the cars you race, and they're still successful, they still win races, and so that culture within Porsche understands that. I have no doubt that Audi understands that. When you look at what happened to Audi, a company that had a sales problem, an image problem, and look at what's happened to Audi since they started competing at Le Mans, and how they've emerged as being a dominant top-end car manufacturer. Integrating racing into the mainstream is an ongoing challenge. And for instance, this morning here, how many people are in the audience from an automobile manufacturer? Well, why aren't they here this morning? I mean, during my career, I went to every one of these things I could, because again, you learned about the business, and you learned about, the things Mike talked about this morning. I've been away from it for a while, but I've learned from it. And until we get, at some point in time, the automobile manufacturers are going to knock on the door of a conference like this. Right now they're flushing money. They're doing all kind of peripheral things. They're the official vehicle of everything. And again, where's their focus on the core product, the race? So again, it's an ongoing thing within a company. And the reason I didn't talk about Formula One was because it's a totally different game. And I think they truly do have that integration and technology transfer, but the specifications are written to do it. They went to V6 engines. They're not popular with everyone, but if you're spending the kind of millions of dollars they spend, I think to justify it to the board of directors, they have to have that.
Yeah, and I think that in particular Ferrari, as an example, does a pretty good job at bringing that technology back. Ken Lingenfelter, who owns our company, has a new LaFerrari that actually gets delivered next week. And I'll guarantee you the technology, much of it that's in that car came from that race car that went right into that. So, and you raised the point, there's nobody here from an OE. You get back what you invest. So if you choose to invest and you choose to learn from that, then you'll get something back from it. If you choose not to, it's guaranteed you won't.
I think in our discussions with OEs, you're just up against conventional wisdom, and there's a lack. When times are good, people don't take the risks they should be taking, I think, and think sort of outside of the box. It's easy to say, okay, we'll do a Super Bowl ad, 30 seconds, costs us $4.5 million. That's before we even design the ad or, create the copy and all of that. And okay, so you do a Super Bowl ad, all right, 30 seconds, and right next to you is a competitor, right after your ad is a competitor. Unless your competitor is like the Apple ad in 1984, nobody's going to remember that. But it's easy to justify within these companies as opposed to putting the money into something a little different.
Well, I still think in an automobile company, they have metrics to measure everything today, and I spent 40 years rationalizing why they should be in racing. But it's still very important to have a key executive that likes the business.
Yeah. And has that passion.
Yeah, they've got to have the passion, that's for sure.
Passion, there's no measurement for what that passion
And you mentioned Porsche. I was lucky to go to Weissach a couple of years ago, and you can cut the passion there with a knife. It's unbelievable, that place. It's just phenomenal. If you ever have a chance, it's like, I guess, like going to Maranello. It's pretty special.
Well, this is maybe a little bit out of school. I probably shouldn't tell this, but 26 years at GM, I was involved in the performance side exclusively for about my last 7 years. And I used to explain to them in meetings the difference between car people and regular people. A car guy will go to an event and be up at 6 in the morning, on the road at 7 to get to the next venue. They'll work till 6 o'clock at night in the display. Then they'll go over and help fix cars until 8 or 9 when it's done. And when they get back to the hotel, they go look at the cars in the parking lot. Non-car people are worried about golf at 3 in the afternoon.
The car myth is a big thing, and for every true car person, there's 1,000 wannabes. And one of the greatest examples I ever saw of this was when GM hired Bob Lutz. And all of a sudden, all the key executives started smoking cigars.
Our R&D panel, we could probably continue with these guys all day, but fascinating stuff. Let's hear it for Troy and for our R&D panel. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
And